WWE Survivor Series 2003. Genuinely one of my favorite, if not my very favorite, Survivor Series of all time. It's just so ridiculous. There's gravesites, there's ambulances, there's Nathan Jones. Every ridiculous aspect of wrestling is included in this show, which makes for a very, very fun time. There's drama, there's blood, there's a lot of nipple play. Arguably too much nipple play, but we can get past that. Needless to say, there's a lot to unpack here. Lot to unpack, lot to undress. So turn around, let me have that zipper. Because we're about to... right here on the Apron Bump Podcast.
It's the hardest. Talk around and disregard it. Strip you off the ground, show you what hard is. Standing strong and proud, nothing can knock this. Let's get started.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. How is everybody doing today? Welcome to the Apron Bump Podcast. I am your host, the hardest part of the ring, Kyle. How's everybody doing today? I know I've asked you that like 87 times already. And you can't respond because I'm talking to myself. Oh, Nelly, we got a doozy. We got a doozy today. Survivor Series 2003. Man, let me paint a picture for you fellas and fellows. 2003. So I'm, what am I? I am about 10 years old. So I guess like a few years after that, really. I had this show on DVD. I still do, right in the bookcase behind me. Middle school era, hardest part of the ring. I've probably brought this up on this podcast before, if not other ones. I was a big old slut for RuneScape. The video game RuneScape, if you're not familiar, it's a MMORPG, I believe is the genre. It's kind of like a World of Warcraft, but better. But I was balls deep into it. The reason I bring this up is because oftentimes, I'm sitting in my room, I'll have my computer in front of me. Diagonal to me, I'll have a television. I would watch DVDs as I played RuneScape for hours and hours, days upon days, weeks, months of my life dedicated to RuneScape, cutting down trees, selling the logs, slaughtering little spider things, mining for ore, crafting leather armor. I was a bit of a hen in RuneScape. But I bring this up it's because I would often rewatch things a lot playing RuneScape. And often what I would rewatch is Survivor Series 2003. I've probably seen this show more times. There's not another wrestling show out there that I've seen more times than Survivor Series 2003. And for good reason. For very good reason. It's a fun show. Is it a good show? That's kind of the theme of this podcast. Is it a good show? Maybe not, but it's fun. So if it's a fun show, then it is a good show, I would say, right? We got a Buried Alive match. Vince McMahon versus The Undertaker. We got an ambulance match. Shane McMahon versus Kane. We got Stone Cold's career on the line in one of my favorite 5-on-5 Survivor Series matches of all time. We got Goldberg versus Triple H for the world title. The Bashams are here. Mark Cuban is here. We get all into Nathan Jones and this weird iteration of Matt Morgan. I mean, this show has it all. It has it all and then some. It is a wild ride, and I am excited to get into it. So let's just quit the dilly-dallying and get right to it. But first, let me give a shout out to my beautiful, beautiful guest, Mark from Booking Like a Mark podcast. You can catch him wherever you listen to podcasts. Him and his co-hosts, they do a great job at rebooking things as per their name, Booking Like a Mark. They'll do like fantasy scenarios from the past. They'll look at like current stuff that's happening and like kind of go through how they would rebook that. They'll introduce like pop culture, like you recently just released some like Batman arcs as WWE storylines. A very unique, very well done podcast. I strongly recommend you check out my boy Mark and his cast of characters as co-hosts. Very entertaining podcast. Strongly recommend it once again. I'll put all of his info in the description below. Give it a check out, ski, follow, subscribes, likes, thumbs up. Do all that for me at Apron Bump all across the board. Make sure you're following on YouTube as well. I don't do good enough at plugging that, but putting up a lot of YouTube exclusive content these days. So feel free to check that out. Speaking of things I never plug, the Discord. Join the Discord, why don't you? That link's in the description as well. We have a good old time there. We got a predictions league going. We talk current stuff. We talk old stuff. We talk bondage. We talk it all. We do it all, just as this show we're about to talk about encompasses. So let's get right. Oh, one more thing. Well, you thought you were all plugged up. I see there's a little bit more room to put stuff in there. I'm gonna one more plug to get you all plugged. How many times can I say plug in one sentence? If you like this type of episode, you like the ruthless aggression, you like this era of wrestling, this era of WWE, well, I'll have you know, you can binge away all of this era, starting from the very beginning, whether you want to start from ruthless aggression, which is like mid 2002. I believe Vengeance is kind of where I cut the line for my podcast for that. But I've covered WWE back to Royal Rumble 2001, at least this era. Royal Rumble 2001 all the way up to now. So every single pay-per-view between then and here, I've covered. So find the link in the description if you want to go to my website where that's filtered down for you. You can go to the episodes tab and select Ruthless Aggression, and that'll get you to wherever you want to go or whatever era you want to hear me gallivant about. But I am babbling, so let's just get into this gosh darn episode, why don't we? Okay? WWE Survivor Series 2003 with myself and Mark from Booking Like a Mark. Oh, I see. Well, good thing I didn't get me complimenting you on recording. That was the guy. I like the titles. You got the women's title, the old undisputed title. Are those the only ones you got?
So that one actually is the toy one from actually like when I was watching in 2003. And then the women's one, I actually just won a women's trivia night a couple months back. And that's signed by Lita and Mickey James.
Oh, nice. I was about to say that's an odd choice of title, but that backstory and the signatures make it all worth it. That's pretty sick.
Exactly. And I figured, especially with Lita being on this show, and we actually met her. So it was a great story that I could throw in here.
Oh, man. You know what? I forgot she was on this show. I just watched it a few days ago. That's how quick it was. But appreciate you. I'm a little dark here. Let me switch this out. Yeah, I appreciate you hopping on here, man. You said Survivor Series was one of your favorite shows of all time.
For some odd reason, yeah. And thanks to you, that's greatly changed because now I actually had to rewatch it as an adult. So little different experience.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't age well. Yeah, because this was, I was with you. I mean, Survivor Series, I've probably watched this show more than any other wrestling event ever because I got this on DVD back in the day. And I would just like rewatch. I would like play video games on my computer and watch it with it in the background. So I've seen the show a bunch. It's been a while. But I guess I'll pose the question to you. How did it age? Overall thoughts on the show before we dive balls deep into it?
It kind of felt like an Angle show, kind of like this year's SummerSlam. There was definitely some wrestling mixed in, but a lot of the angles, Undertaker, it was just his transition back to the dead man. Vince, after this, he pretty much got written off until we saw him again at WrestleMania, kind of, and he was a face by then. So a lot of it just kind of, it was like a season finale almost. And then we started the road to WrestleMania after this. We set up Brock and Goldberg. And so it was a lot of angles, but the matches were pretty good too.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was definitely angle heavy. This isn't a purist's dream by any stretch of the imagination, but there are some angles that I thought were pretty good. I think, to me, in my opinion, it lived up to what I thought it was for the most part. In fact, there was actually some matches that I really enjoyed more so than I remember. But yeah, lots of meat on the bone, to say the least.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And the other thing I noticed was it should have been sponsored by Schick instead of Xbox, because Bald was beautiful on this show. I mean, you had Kurt Angle, Nathan Jones, A-Train, Kane, Doug Basham, Danny Basham, Stone Cold, obviously. I think Teddy Long. So just almost every match had a bald guy in it.
Who is your favorite bald wrestler of all time?
Ooh. See, part of me wants to say Kurt Angle, But then part of me wants to, are we counting Undertaker from that very short period where he shaved it really close?
You can only take into account the stuff that they did while they were bald. So if you
Okay, then yeah.
like that segment of Undertaker the most, then which would
No,
be an
no, then
odd
Angle.
choice.
All the way. Yeah.
Not Pitbull number 2, not Goldberg.
Nope.
Other baldies. Ricochet.
Like we said, Nathan Jones on the show. He had a great career, but not my favorite.
Dude, I desperately need to get into some Nathan Jones. So let's just dive right into this bad boy.
Well, let's go for it.
First of all, the show opens up Survivor Series 03. It's a very the stage setup. I mean, the stage itself is whatever, but we got a grave site on the stage. We got an ambulance on the other side. It's just, there's so much wackiness to this show. But that being said, we get started here with something that I desperately miss, and something that I don't think, even at this time period, I think it had been a while since they had done it. But we got a traditional Survivor Series 5-on-5 tag team match. We got Team Angle versus Team Lesnar. Team Angle is comprised of Kurt Angle, John Cena, Hardcore Holly, Chris Benoit, and Bradshaw. Team Lesnar is the biggest team in the history of Survivor Series. Over 1,800 pounds of beef.
Ooh,
we got Brock Lesnar, Big Show, A-Train, Matt Morgan, and the Wrestler of the Year, Nathan Jones. My goodness, where do we even begin here? I mean, let's just talk about Team Lesnar for a second. Lesnar, A-Train, Big Show, they're kind of the staples of SmackDown at this point. But then they randomly just brought over Matt Morgan and Nathan Jones. I think just for the sake of having the biggest team of all time, because I don't think either guy really stayed around after this, unless I'm wrong there.
Nathan Jones was out like within the month. He didn't like being on the road. I was listening to the JR podcast on this one, and he was like, nope, Nathan Jones was not cut out for the wrestling business.
No, he's like, which is a shame because he has such a crazy look. He is comically jacked. Like, to be that tall and also densely muscled is like something you don't see a lot. Like Sid stands out as a guy that was like that. Prime Kane, but there's not a lot of guys that are tall and jacked. He has a really tiny head, but we can move past that because he's Australian and he was in jail. I don't know if you heard, but he was in Bago Row.
Was he?
Bago Row?
Something like that. Yeah.
But yeah, so he's out of here. I mean, you watch him work, you can understand. Matt Morgan would come back at some point briefly as Carlito's Heavy. He had the little stuttering gimmick, which was a choice. But yeah, Matt Morgan's pretty unspectacular here, to say the least, too, which is surprised because when he was in TNA, I remember him being pretty good in TNA.
Oh, I loved him in TNA.
What, 4 or 5 years after this?
Yeah, the DNA of TNA.
Ooh, that theme song, the look. I mean, he had it all. Yeah, so his TNA run I thought was pretty solid, but still got a little fine tuning. Yeah, I guess I guess overall thoughts on the names of the people involved in this match, because there's a lot going on here.
Right. Well, I really like the inclusion of Hardcore Holly, which I didn't think I would until rewatching it, and I actually love that he got eliminated like right off the bat, because that was exactly what his storyline was. He just wanted Brock. Like, he wasn't there for a match; he was there to fight, and so immediately he's gone. And so they could just put that on the back burner, focus back on Lesnar and Angle, and then bring Hardcore back in, going for the Royal Rumble. So I actually really liked him in this. Nathan Jones, as we said, the MVP. He had the best 60 seconds I have ever seen. He fell over while accidentally kicking Matt Morgan. He couldn't get over the ropes when Kurt Angle went to clothesline him. Then he got back in too early while Angle was going for a pin. So he just stood in the corner and the camera zoomed in really tight on Angle. So you wouldn't see Nathan just kind of chilling and waiting to get back in the match. So MVP right there, Nathan Jones.
I guess not everybody's cut out for it, but yeah, the him tripping. So like you said, Hardcore Holly's here. And I agree. I do like his inclusion. They're playing off of Brock for real, breaking his neck roughly a year before this. Hardcore returned on SmackDown. I believe it was a week, maybe 2 weeks before this, and he got a crazy reaction. I don't know if you've watched like his return to SmackDown, but he comes in, attacks people with chairs. He calls out Brock. The crowd's going nuts for Hardcore Holly. It's insane. It's the biggest reaction he's ever gotten, and then so you
no
can
doubt,
kind of see why he would go on to get that outlier WWE title shot a month or two after this. But to your point, he's just here. It's very similar to like Hangman's involvement in the Blood and Guts recently. Like he just wanted to kill Swerve, didn't care about the match results. So this is kind of a similar vein here. Hardcore Holly just wants to break Brock's neck. He'll do it at any cost. He attacks Brock before the bell even rings, runs him into the steps. He won't stop attacking him, so he gets DQ'd. Might even be before the bell rings or like as soon as the bell rings. So he's eliminated immediately. But then, like 15 seconds later, Bradshaw hits a clothesline from hell onto A-Train and eliminates him. So boom, boom, 2 guys out within the first few seconds. And then right after that, Big Show choke slammed to Bradshaw to eliminate him. So we got 3 eliminations within the first minute. What are your? Because that's kind of we kind of see a similar kind of course of events in the Raw Survivor Series match too. What are your thoughts on like these style of matches and the quick eliminations like this?
I like that they have a little bit of unpredictability to them, because if you look now when we just have War Games at Survivor Series, the match doesn't start until everyone's in the ring. So you have all of this time where nothing is like really happening. Like obviously people are fighting, they're kicking each other's ass, but no one is actually getting eliminated, getting pinned. And with a Survivor Series match, I mean, bing, bang, boom, guys getting knocked out. It keeps the pacing up. It keeps the excitement up, especially if it's an opening contest like this. So I really liked it. That's actually what drew me in. Like I said, Hardcore Holly out immediately. And I was like, oh, damn. Okay. We're not playing around here. We're just going right into it. So I like the pacing on that one.
I agree. It establishes a sense of urgency a bit. I'm with you on the War Games. Like, I don't know, me personally, I just turn my brain off for the first, 45 minutes because the match isn't going to have any consequence until then. So it's like, why bother paying attention? But here, people dropping like flies. Anybody can get eliminated at any second. They establish that right off the gate. Then it slows down a little bit. The big men kind of slow it down. They get their heat. But then all hell breaks loose. Everybody busts into the ring. Kurt suplexing people. There's a point where you mentioned Nathan Jones. What exactly happened? Because Matt Morgan's in there, but Nathan Jones tries to boot somebody, but he ends up tripping over Matt Morgan. It's just a big cluster. I mean, do you remember exactly like what happened?
That's exactly what happened. Matt Morgan was holding Angle up for Nathan Jones. He runs across the ring. Angle gets out of the way, but Nathan Jones misjudged it. So not only does he kick, Matt Morgan, but he trips over him as well. And then immediately that's when Angle goes for the clothesline. And I guess the ropes were tight because Kane checked them. If you watch later on for the ambulance match, knowing how that match was going to open, Kane was purposely checking the ropes to see how loose they were. And Nathan Jones did not do that apparently, and he completely misjudged it. And Angle had to pretty much clothesline, then throw him over, Royal Rumble style. And it was such a disaster. I was so happy when he got eliminated. I was like, okay, he was green as hell. Let's move on with the professionals,
You're not wrong. You're not wrong because Kurt pretty much disposes of these new big henchmen pretty quickly. Angle slam to Matt Morgan. 1, 2, 3. He's out of there. Ankle lock to Nathan Jones. He taps. He's out of there. But then pretty surprisingly, Brock Lesnar follows up right away, catches Kurt off guard with an F5 and eliminates Kurt Angle. So you wouldn't think he'd just be one of the middle guys eliminated, given that he's the captain. But kind of makes sense. But again, that goes to your point.
Yeah, you said anything can happen in a Survivor Series match. The eliminations can come from anywhere. And so that told you no one was safe. So I like that.
Yeah, and definitely like with what the final 2 is, it kind of makes sense. But as of this point in the match, it's 2-on-2. It's Cena and Benoit versus Big Show and Brock. Benoit gets Brock in the crossface and makes Brock Lesnar tap out, which is correct because Brock Lesnar, he only tapped out once, I believe, to Kurt Angle, and that was like a big deal. It was like, where's animals tapping out?
Hmm.
So to see Benoit tap him out was pretty surprising, especially because Benoit hadn't really been involved in anything significant for a while. So it felt kind of random at the time, but it built to something more after that.
Exactly.
Um,
This was kind of like I said, was the start to the road to WrestleMania. So it was a big moment for
yes.
Benoit because we know he would end up winning the Rumble later. But no
Hmm.
mercy, he was just fighting A Train, middle of the card, nothing too special. It was a good match, but nothing really too special about that. And then, like you said, to have the WWE champion tapping out to Benoit, all of a sudden the rocket was strapped to his back. So,
Big deal. Definitely a big deal.
mhm.
Um, but then Big Show choke slams Benoit. But then Cena, with his chain to the head of Big Show, hits Big Show with the FU, which at this point, I don't think we had ever seen him do the FU to Big Show. So just the visual of it was incredible. And hits it on Show. 1, 2, 3. And Team Angle gets the win with your final two being Chris Benoit and John Cena, which is, to your point, I would say this is definitely the beginning of Chris Benoit's ascent. Because, like you said, he was just middling in with A Train. He had a random tag team with Rhino. Like he'd been present. He's always on screen, but he's never like in anything significant. But this was definitely a big. They were strapping the rocket to him, and also John Cena, which, as I'm watching like everything in real time, this is super significant for Cena because this is his pretty much his first big win, because he's been involved in feuds with Undertaker and Kurt and Brock, but he's lost all these matches. But this is his first huge win, and he would go on to Mania, win the U.S. title, and then we're off to the fucking races with John Cena. But Benoit Cena, final two. What do you make of it?
Right. Well, like you said, all it took for John Cena to finally get over in a match was to turn face, and the fans wanted him to. I remember from No Mercy, your great review on that. You guys were talking about how the fans were cheering for Cena almost as much as they were cheering for Angle. So clearly, turning him heel was the right move. He was kind of dry as a babyface originally. He switched to the Doctor of Thugonomics, went heel. He finally had enough momentum that as soon as they were ready to turn him face, he was good to go. But the match with Angle was proving ground. He did great in that. His match with Undertaker was great. His match with Brock, I didn't think was as good, but that was mainly due to Brock's limitations too. I mean, obviously, Kurt Angle is like the peak dance partner you could have. So it was
Right.
definitely Cena's time. And it's so interesting when he breaks out the Doctor of Thugonomics every so often now because people forget that was his gimmick. He used to come out.
Yeah.
He called Team Lesnar the Nation of Masturbation on the SmackDown before this one. So, like, he was as raw as it gets. And then he goes into Mr. PG Super Cena. So it's actually really cool when you go back and watch these because, honestly, kids these days who know him as Super Cena, that would shock them. Like that would not fly
Hmm.
in WWE today. So it was a great time for Cena and his development, Randy Orton's development, Batista, Brock, that time period. That's why I love this. I go back and even the matches that aren't great, I'm just so fond of the Ruthless Aggression era because you had guys coming on their way out like Hogan, Austin, Rock, but then you had these other guys coming in. It was such a transitional period, and people don't always appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. And Cena was like, yeah, I'm glad you brought up the rap, because the crowd, I mean, ever since he established this gimmick, the crowd always eats up his raps. They don't age very well in hindsight a lot of times, but man,
Hmm.
the Nation of Masturbation, come on now, that's good stuff.
Hmm.
Who could hate this guy? And yeah, I think people have been hungry at this point for a character to latch on to, and Cena's definitely that guy. And yeah, that's a good point. Kids these days probably didn't know that. They probably don't know that this existed, because I guess in the grand scheme of things, it was such like a small percentage of his career where he was doing this. But it's what started it all, man. It's what started it all. It's
Hmm.
fascinating to rewatch for sure. But yeah. Any other notes on that five? I enjoyed this match honestly more than I thought I would.
Oh yeah. Honestly, the only thing, because obviously my gimmick is booking, and I was looking at it and I was like, man, Matt Morgan, Nathan Jones, these new guys, they had at No Mercy set up the FBI as, kind of bigger deal, interfering in the Bikers Chain match. And I was like, man, what if we put Stamboli and Palumbo in instead and had Nunzio as like the mascot on the outside? And that I feel like could have been a little more interesting instead of like just having the awkwardness. But then again, hindsight 2020, they didn't know Nathan Jones and Matt Morgan weren't going to be big deals. right? They
Hmm.
probably thought they were going to be the next Cenas and Ortons. But I was looking at that and I was like, man, the FBI would have been kind of interesting here and seeing what they can do on Survivor Series.
That is interesting. I'm glad because yeah, they were involved in the main event of No Mercy. So it's interesting that they weren't even involved on the show at all. And even
Mhm.
watching the SmackDowns leading up to this, they weren't really present. I don't know if somebody got injured or what, but it's weird. It would be hilarious though if you just like switched out Matt Morgan for Nunzio. So you have like four giants and then fucking Guido there. That would have been
Right.
something. It would not have been
Because
worse.
he
Who
would have
knows?
felt like a big deal. Like he would have walked up to you acting like he was as big as the Big Show, knowing they had his back. And then as soon as he gets hit, he would just tag out. He'd be a little shit. It would be hilarious.
Right. Damn. And another speaking of rebooking or just kind of scenarios, what struck me watching this is like Matt Morgan, I feel like he's a guy that really would have benefited from an NXT. Because
Oh
they
yeah.
didn't, I mean, they had OVW at this point, but like having like like a performance center, like all these people to work with, that kind of platform. I think if Matt Morgan had that, he might have been something special in WWE, but unfortunately they had limited resources at this time. But he'd figure it out, I guess. However,
Mhm.
TNA, whatever. I don't know what he did in between now and TNA, but I don't know. I'm a big Matt Morgan guy, big Blueprint guy over here. So, but bigger Nathan Jones guy, obviously. I mean, he's the goat.
Oh,
He's the goat.
clearly.
But after that match, we get so the two big matches really, at least big singles matches on this show. We got Shane McMahon versus Kane and an ambulance match, and we also got Vince McMahon versus Undertaker in a buried alive match. So we got a father and son taking on brothers in two different matches, and we get that acknowledged here for backstage. And Vince McMahon walks into Shane's locker room, and Vince basically lays that all out like, has it ever occurred to you, son, that we're facing brothers? And it's like Vince has this like holier than thou. Feel like a higher power is watching me, and it's not Christopher Daniels, but it's like I feel like I have a higher power watching me. And Shane's like, "Nah, dog, I'm not with that." I'm paraphrasing.
Mhm.
And then Vince walks out, and he sees Stone Cold, who they haven't had an interaction in a while, so that was a cool little moment. They just awkwardly laugh at each other because both of their lives and careers are in peril on this show. This is funny kind of parallels there. But some cool like brand blending here because you don't see Vince and Shane on the same show. You don't see Vince and Austin on the same show. I kind of miss that about the brand extension when it felt really special on these like tentpole shows to see Raw and SmackDown people on the same show. We get some more of that on this show, but I don't know. What'd you make of this whole segment here, I guess?
I loved it. It was this funniest thing because I forgot that Vince had pretty much lost his mind going into this match. And he just walks up and like you
Mm.
said, Shane was like, "What the hell are you talking? Get the hell out of here." And then the fact that like it just ends. Like Vince says his piece, Shane's like, "No, go away." And there's just this awkward
Hmm.
pause before Vince finally walks out. And then him and Austin laughing, it made me so uncomfortable, but in the best way. Especially on a
Right.
rewatch when you know what happens to these guys later and you're just like, oh my god, what are they doing?
Yeah, it's particular. I mean, it's funny because it's like Vince. Spoiler alert: Vince is the only guy that comes out of this show scot free. So it's like he's kind of the wacky one here, but maybe he was right. Maybe somebody was looking out for him. Who knows? He did.
Hmm.
Well, I guess he faced God. He didn't team with God. So maybe I don't know. Maybe I guess they came at odds at some point. But
Yeah, but by that
um,
point Shane was back on his side.
that's a good point. Have you rebooked the God match at all on your show,
I have not. I don't know. I
or
might
do
get
you
struck
plan
down
to?
if I try that one. It would be
Well,
interesting
there's
because there
no
was
problem.
potential there.
Vince McMahon 2024 talking about him and fighting God. There's no way that would cause any controversy or any hup up online. I don't know
Oh,
what
none.
your problem is.
But honestly, actually,
Well,
thinking back to it, that was an interesting period too, because again, Vince had lost his mind. Like he went on just these peaks and valleys where he was just this shrewd businessman to just completely off his rocker and then back, and he would just ebb and flow throughout his whole
mhm.
career as an on-screen character. And he goes from oh God is watching my back to facing God years later. It's like how did we even get here? Almost every Vince match you look at, and you go, how the fuck did we get here? You know, what are we doing?
2003 is just chock full of Vince. I mean, facing Hulk Hogan, facing his daughter, facing Undertaker. Like, but I think after this show, he kind of steps back for a while, thankfully. But
Right, he sells the injuries a little bit, and like I said, he came back. The next time we saw him, I think, was on the road to WrestleMania when he started making some matches, and then he fought Eric Bischoff. And by then, like I said, he was a face again. He just had these ebbs and flows for no reason.
he's a wacky character, to say the least. To say the very, very least. But speaking of wacky, we got the women's title on the line next. We got Molly Holly, the champion, defending against Lita. Lita, who has recently returned from neck surgery. She was out for over a year recovering from that. So she's back to face off against the champ. The women's division at this point is pretty cold, to say the least. You know, they've tried some stuff with Gail Kim. Trish is kind of involved with other stuff. So is Lita, really. Like, Trish and Lita are kind of in the midst of a story with Christian and Chris Jericho. That really is that's the more significant story with them than the women's title, unfortunately. But Molly versus Lita, not a terrible match, I wouldn't say, but it felt pretty cold to me. I don't know. What do you think about it?
I was pleasantly surprised because I always think back to this era as just having garbage in the women's division. And this match, I actually watched it. It was one of the few safe ones from 2003 that I could show my girlfriend, who was with me when I won the women's championship, because she was like, "Can you show me some matches?" Like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I showed her this one. She was actually very impressed with the athleticism. You had Molly Holly doing the Molly, whatever her finisher was off the top rope. I forget what it's
Molly
called.
go round.
You had her. There we go. You had her doing the backflips. You had Lita jumping all around. And my girlfriend was like, "No, like, women's wrestling at this point seemed okay. What are you talking about?" And then I showed her some of the other stuff, and she was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, just only show me the good stuff." Yeah.
Yeah, it was and I've said it before, like, the women's division in this era is better than a lot of people probably remember. They weren't given a huge spotlight and their matches weren't given time, but the women worked their asses off. Like, it was pretty, like, it was Molly's busting out the handspring elbow into the corner. There's power bombs, like you said, Molly go rounds off the top rope for a 2 count. So there's some fun false finishes even towards the top, or towards the end of this. Lita hits a power bomb for a 2 count, but ultimately Molly exposes the middle turnbuckle and sends Lita face first into it, which is interesting because usually the person that takes it off gets driven into it. But no, Molly just had it planned well, I guess, here, and that was able to get the win for the champ here. So Molly beats Lita, and yeah, like you said, pretty good match, but it's just unfortunately just kind of women's title, women's wrestling is more than an afterthought at this point.
Yeah, I think it was like 6 minutes and 48 seconds. If Lita was still showing the thong coming out of the shorts, maybe she would have gotten more time at this point. But 6 minutes, 48 seconds, and I don't remember any time I've seen, as soon as a turnbuckle is removed, pretty much, it gets used because they didn't have any time. Normally you do that as like a storyline development. Middle of the match, turnbuckle gets exposed. You even have the ref trying to put it back on. No, this one it was like, take it off, and as soon as Lita walks over, she's face first into it. It was like, oh, okay. Ring the bell, the match is over. Ran out of time.
Just efficient. Molly's maybe the best at exposing the turnbuckle. Do we think about that? Maybe that's a possibility. Maybe she's just the master of it.
Her new finisher, maybe. But I got a quick trivia question for you. So they said Lita going into this match was 0-2 in Survivor Series. Did she ever win a match at Survivor Series? So 0-2. Obviously here she lost, so she was 0-3.
I know she lost in 06 to Trish. 05, 04. Man, it's a crapshoot. I'm gonna go ahead and say no, she's never won.
Correct. So she lost. She actually lost to Trish in 04. And then she lost to Mickie James in 06. That was her retirement match.
Didn't Trish and Lita, wasn't Trish's retirement match? Oh no, that was Unforgiven.
That was Unforgiven that year.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking of. Yep. Interesting. Yeah, JR was busting out all the stats on this show. I think
exactly.
Triple H had never won at Survivor Series. all this stuff as if it matters. But boy howdy, we get after that an ambulance match, Kane versus Shane. So this is a feud that's been brewing for a while. Kick-started by Kane unmasking, going on a rampage, tombstoning Linda McMahon on the stage, which prompted Shane to come back, defend his mother. And then, just a comedy of, people lighting each other on fire, Kane getting dumped into a flaming dumpster. Their last man standing match where Shane jumped off the stage. You got Kane getting thrown into the limo and getting driven into a tractor trailer, almost killing him. Shane getting his balls electrocuted. This had everything you could want from wrestling. And that begs the question, is this the feud of the year right here?
No. And the only reason why I say that is Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar having the 3 matches,
Fair
WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and the Iron Man match. But honestly,
Very fair.
It really is right up there because this was Kane's peak. He unmasked, all of a sudden he was getting all this momentum. It was weird that his big opponent was Shane McMahon, but they weren't ready to put him in the title picture. Michaels was busy, Triple H was busy, Goldberg was busy. So Shane worked as an opponent, especially with the spots they were doing in this match. It made Kane look like $1 million. He looked indestructible. And I would say probably top 3 for Rivalries of the Year.
Yeah, it's, in my opinion, it's carrying Raw on its back, this feud. Because where you got Triple H is injured, Goldberg is fiddle fucking with whoever the hell. So there's not a lot going on Raw, but this was a bright spot. And rewatching this, it's just hilarious, entertaining. Matches are good too. The Last Man Standing was great. And this match I thought was pretty good too. There is a weird energy to this match in rewatching it because just the nature of it, an ambulance match, a lot of this match, pretty much most of it occurs not in the ring. They do a lot backstage. They do a lot in the aisleway. My thought watching this was like, what do you think the live experience is watching this ambulance match? Because they popped for the big moments, but it didn't seem like the crowd was into a lot of this.
Well, part of it too was because of the setup of that stage, because you had to have the gravesite. It was a very small stage, so it was a smaller Titantron. So when they were backstage, if you're in the crowd, how could you actually see what was going on? It's not like Monday Night Raw where you have the huge screen and you could see everything. So all of a sudden, and then when they finally come back, if they're fighting behind the ambulance and you're sitting on the other side of the ring, you still don't know what's going on. So it probably just came from that. They couldn't see what they were supposed to get into. Whereas the Last Man Standing match, like you said, when he's on the top of the stage, everyone can see him up there and everyone can see him just go straight down.
Right. Yeah. But that being said, I really enjoyed watching this. It's a hot start. They basically replicate how this whole feud started with Shane sprinting at Kane in the ring and then both toppling over the ropes. By the way, Kane fell right on his head from the top of the ring, which explains a lot. But yeah, so that was a cool little callback there. Shane's out quick, the monitors to the head of Kane. Shane busting out his elbow from the top rope through the announce table, just as you can't have a Shane McMahon match and not have that spot. It's obligatory.
That's his finisher. He never finishes the match, but that's his that's his signature, I should say. Yeah.
Right. Shane's strategy here, I gotta commend him. He leads Kane into the crowd, makes him chase him. Shane runs to the backstage area, the loading dock or whatever the hell. Kane, like a big dumb idiot that he is, chases Shane, loses him, but Shane wraps around the hall, so he comes back behind Kane and hits him with a kendo. It's just comedy, this whole thing, but Shane really kicking his ass here in the beginning. I don't know, what'd you make of this, backstage portion of the match?
Looking at it from an adult perspective now, kind of knowing a little bit more about things, I find it very interesting when the cameras kept cutting out. And I was like, oh, maybe they had to tape this earlier so they can kind of line up the spots. But I think there's a tie for me of the highlight of this match. There's Shane, as you said, just kind of sneaking up on Kane somehow. I don't know where he went to begin with the kendo stick. But then also, when Shane wants the ambulance back there to come around, and it's taking too long, So he pulls the stretcher out, and then there's a speed bump. So you see him trying to pull it over the speed bump, and I'm like, wow, he actually did not think this out as much as I thought he did. Especially,
No.
he backs into Kane. Kane goes
Well,
flying through the thing, but it looked so awful. It was just terrible, that part.
it was my favorite part of that whole deal was that after Shane wears him out with the kendo stick, he pulls a walkie-talkie out of nowhere. Send it, send it. First, this what is he in? By the way, it's a separate ambulance, so it's not the agreed upon ambulance. It's not regulation ambulance. It's just a a regular ambulance that he called on a walkie-talkie. Backs up. Very suspicious. I mean, there's just a lot of conspiracies running amok here, but yes, to your point, him rolling the stretcher over a speed bump that just happened, like of all places to park the ambulance, like, come on now. But he had a plan. He tried to run, or he did run Kane over, I guess if you want to call it that, and knocks him through a phone booth or ticket booth, whatever the hell that was. Going through the glass. But Kane is he rises up. You're gonna need to do a little bit more than that. They fight back to the regulation ambulance in the aisleway on the stage. I mean, how many things can you do with an ambulance? You ram the guy into it. You use the door. I mean, the door shots looked snug. I will commend them for that. Look, Kane definitely got his bell rung with a few of those. Shane takes the door, smashes it open onto Kane's head. Maybe that was a receipt for Kane throwing Shane onto the windshield, and the back of Shane's head cracked the windshield.
Ooh. Oh yeah, that was awful.
You gotta feel like that wasn't like a planned thing. That wasn't one of these sugar glass plan to break deals. I think Shane's head legit cracked a windshield there. So,
but that was the whole period. If you look, I mean, right? We had Eddie Guerrero. Big Show did that to him a month before this, and you had the parking lot brawl. People were just destroying automobiles left and right. It was a crazy time.
Man, I guess they just had a junkyard ready. They just had a bunch of cars to dispose of. I don't know, but yeah, this ambulance took a beating. Shane getting lawn darted into it. Yeah, this coast to coast off of the ambulance. Thoughts on that?
As a kid, I loved it. It was so beautiful. As an adult, when you realize that he literally positioned the crash pad just for that spot, it takes a little bit out of it. But still, he cleared it. That was so dangerous. What if he slipped running across the top of an ambulance? Could have snapped his damn neck. And he comes off picture perfect, sailing through the air. That's what Shane's specialty was. He didn't care. He came from Vince's loins. He also had huge grapefruits, and it showed here.
For sure. I mean, like you said, so little margin for error. Like, yeah, it's a crash pad he sets up, whatever. But goddamn, pal, like there were so many ways that could have gone wrong. He could have smashed his head on the concrete. He could have not made it. But it looked pretty much as good as it could have. You put the trash can in front of Kane, all that stuff. But that was not enough to get the win. Shane tries to shove Kane in this ambulance, which, by the way, anybody unfamiliar with an ambulance match, you win by putting your opponent in the ambulance, shutting the doors. Kane blocks the doors from closing, pulls Shane into the ambulance. Who in God's name knows what happened inside there? But they eventually fight. But they eventually fight out. Choke slams into the ambulance, basically, and then hits a tombstone on the concrete aisleway. And then Kane shit cans Shane into this ambulance, slams the doors, and Kane is your winner. So that being said, it was an entertaining match, if nothing else. Very stunt heavy, very silly, but that's wrestling for you. So overall, I enjoyed it, I think.
Right. I like that they ended it with Kane hitting the tombstone because that's how the storyline had started. Right? You talked about the callback at the beginning of the match, but this one ended with the tombstone onto what was pretty much the stage there, just like Kane had done to Linda, that brought Shane back to begin with. So I really like the telling of that story. But I always thought, looking back, especially now, that it was weird that this match was taking place. These guys were still feuding because Shane was pissed at what Kane did to his mom. But by this point, like, Linda was on SmackDown. Linda was in Stephanie's corner. She was completely fine, no neck brace. And it was like they're kind of telling two very different stories here. And the only connection was Vince
That
showing
is,
up there
yeah.
and talking to Shane.
Man, yeah, that is a good point. I didn't even really take that into account. It's like almost two different universes, Raw and SmackDown, so that never really even factored into my mind.
Mhm.
But that's a good point. But it's the principle of it, you know. Yeah, she
Right.
might be physically fine, but the mental, who knows? She might be
Well,
still
that's what started
reeling
it.
from that.
At this point, I think Shane was just mad that he got his nuts electrocuted, and he was just going to go for revenge for that still.
Yeah, I would take umbrage if that happened to me. That's a very good
Right?
point. It's funny though, like because nowadays Kane and Linda are both involved in politics. And I just saw a picture recently of them just both in suits. And just like, oh, my friend Kane. Like how times change.
Oh, yeah.
But oh, by the way, the ambulance struggles to get out of there. I don't know
Oh,
if
yeah.
they knew I don't know if they put the gravesite there after it was parked. There you go. There you go. I mean, it was the windshield's cracked, so I guess you can't blame them. But they had to like maneuver around this grave and then get through the curtains. If they eventually get out of there, it would have been funny if they just couldn't get out and they just had to leave Shane in there the rest of the show. But they did it. They finished the story. But speaking of building to WrestleMania, we got old Brock Lesnar backstage getting interviewed. He says he didn't lose earlier tonight. He didn't tap out. I don't know what you're talking about. He's in denial. He's pissed. Then in walks Bill Goldberg. So we got the WWE champion and the world champion on one screen, which is very rare at this point. And just kind of like introducing each other. Hey, nice title. Hey, nice cock. You know, the normal things guys do. But little did we know that this would be maybe one of the most infamous matches in WrestleMania history. Did this strike you? How did this strike you, I guess, watching like back in the day, seeing these two on screen for the first time together?
In a weird way, the only problem I had with that rivalry was the WrestleMania 20 match. So I can go back and watch any of these segments and I get just as pumped. Because that first face off, especially when you put yourself back in that mindset, like that was mind blowing. Raw versus SmackDown, the two top guys with the titles, similar styles. You thought they were going to kill each other at WrestleMania, and then it fell apart. But honestly, like, especially because at that time, Goldberg probably was my favorite bald wrestler. So I was pumped for that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
was a
changed.
dream
I got
match.
older. Right.
Or is he still top 10 bald?
Yeah, because I don't know if I can get past 10 guys.
Oh yeah, that's not what I hear. That's not what the word on the street. Oh boy. Well, maybe Coach is bald here, right?
Oh yeah, there's another one. Yep.
You might forget because he has just the stylish hat on, but also a neck brace. His coach is here. He comes out for whatever reason. He comes out with a neck brace on. He got 3D'd by the Dudleys on Raw the previous week, so he's still selling the injuries from that. But he's basically here to just let everybody know that he's going to be well soon. Thank you for all the cards. Did you send a card to Jonathan Coachman about his injury?
No. I think I lost the address or I didn't have a stamp or something. I remember writing in for Randy Orton when he had his injury and he had little news network updates. I definitely wrote a letter for him. Yeah.
Right. When he was like 65% healed.
Oh, yeah.
That's probably the point where you're like, oh, let me send him a card. Let me give him this last push. I don't blame you.
I think it was closer to 69. Yeah.
I like the way your mind works. I really enjoy that. Speaking of 69, I would give a big old 69 to Mark Cuban, who is here. I guess he owns the stadium, right? At this point.
I know he owned the Dallas Mavericks at the time. I don't know if he owned the the arena.
That makes more sense. He does own the Mavericks, but
yeah.
I don't know. He has a lot of money. He might own the arena, but he's here ringside. Coach sees him. He's like, "Hey, it's Mark Cuban." So he goes over there to interview him. What does he ask him? He's like, what match are you looking forward to or something?
He asked him which refs are worse, the NBA or the WWE. And Mark Cuban's like, all referees suck. What are you talking about? And I was like, out of all the questions you can ask this man, that's what you went with. That's a bold choice.
Mark Cuban was
Mark
fired up,
Cuban,
though,
you
man.
just saw an ambulance match. You just saw a dude get wrecked and thrown in the back of an ambulance. Do you do that? Like, what did you think of that? No, no. Which refs are worse?
Ambulance matches in the NBA, perhaps. Let's get it cooking. Let's get that idea on the board. Let's workshop it. Mark Cuban's here, front row. Him and coach are going at it, verbally. This is Eric Bischoff comes out to kind of steer the ship here. He's like, "Hey, who are you, Mark Cuban?" He's like, "Hey, you're gonna talk shit?" Because Cuban was like, "I'm here to see Stone Cold whip Eric Bischoff's ass." And then Bischoff comes out and he's like, "Why don't you come say that to my face?" So he gets in the ring. Cuban gets in the ring. They have a little tussle. Eric shoves him. Cuban shoves him back and knocks Eric on his ass. But boy howdy, Mark Cuban turns around into an RKO from Randy Orton. Beautiful sell job, by the way, by Mark Cuban. He took that RKO like a champ.
Definitely.
This is a very, very weird segment here. I mean, I guess you getting Mark Cuban on the pay-per-view, I guess he's a big deal at this point. The Mavericks, who's their guy? Who's the big white guy?
Dirk Nowitzki.
Dirk Nowitzki. He's a big deal at this point. So I guess, whatever. But I don't know. What'd you make of this whole deal?
Well, this is probably about the point that I was getting very confused as a kid because I was like, wait a sec. I thought Tajiri was supposed to defend the Cruiserweight title against Jamie Noble. And instead they cut that so they can have this segment, which it was a great segment. Like you said, he sold that RKO. It kept building up Randy Orton. I was like, wait a sec. I thought we were supposed to have a match,
That is, they cut Tajiri and Jamie Noble from Mark Cuban. It's not just a Cruiserweight title match. Tajiri had blinded Jamie's girlfriend permanently. This is a very personal feud.
Right, that got moved to Sunday Night Heat.
I was about to, yeah, okay. I was about to ask. I forgot to check, but I guess they did that on Heat. So I don't know, man. That could have given this show a bit of a work rate, quote unquote, kind of texture to it, because, like you said, there's a lot of gimmicks and chicanery. So it could have been a nice break from that, but no,
like a palate cleanser. Especially, it would have been after the ambulance match, right? So it would have been now we're going back to wrestling, right? But then Mark Cuban, I've got another trivia question for you. I did a little bit of research.
Oh boy!
So Mark Cuban went to the same high school as what WWE Hall of Famer?
I feel like I've heard this before. Is it?
We've talked about him, and he is on this show.
Triple H?
Kurt Angle.
Hall of Famer. Kurt Angle.
Well, Triple H is a Hall of Famer technically with DX, isn't he? He's not in on his own.
Point. That's a very good point.
So,
yeah.
It was a good guess. But yeah, Kurt Angle, it was like, I think they're 10 years apart, so they didn't go at the same time, but same exact high school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Man, just breeds champions. The Pittsburgh Penguins, or whatever the fuck their mascot is. But after that, we got an orgy with Evolution backstage. Various scantily clad women with them. They're drinking champagne. Evolution celebrating because Goldberg, who is going to be defending against Triple H in the main event, Goldberg, his ankle's shattered. It's just a formality at this point, according to Triple H. Like they're already celebrating this title win. Randy Orton, because at first it's just Triple H, Ric Flair, Batista, because Randy was busy RKOing a NBA team's owner. Randy Orton scurries in, says, "Hey guys, did you see what I?" And then he notices a woman to his left, looks at this woman, and then this woman grabs his nipple, which is an odd instinct. When you see somebody shirtless in front of you, is your instinct to just grab? I guess it depends on the context, but
yeah, I was gonna say there's sometimes, yeah, sure,
I mean,
but
I guess
probably not there.
Where are you on nipple play?
Well, I think was that Charmel? Like when I was rewatching it, I was like, I think maybe Booker T's future wife. So I didn't actually look into that, but I think it might have been. And nipple play, there's a place for everything. Probably not in the locker room before your match, but maybe after. Right.
No boom boom before big fight is what
exactly
what I've always heard. So but yeah, that happens. So Speaking of pretty easy transition here. Speaking of nipple play.
Great segue.
We got the Basham brothers with Shaniqua, of course, defending their tag team titles against Los Guerreros. So the Bashams had won the titles on SmackDown a few weeks before this. And the Bashams, they come out with new vests. Would you call it bandoliers?
Chain link. That's all I know. I'm not really into too much of the BDSM stuff. I draw the line at the nipple play, actually. But yeah, it was.
So that's the only thing that's not fair game to you. Okay, I'll note that down for future reference.
But I liked their gear because Taz actually was talking about it a lot, and he told Michael
Cole.
Of
knowledge.
He did. He told him you can't purchase that at Kmart. And it was a very, very weird reference. But I appreciate that because in my youth, I worked at Kmart. So
hell yeah, brother.
I can tell you, we did not sell any BDSM gear. We did sell intimate apparel though. And I used to have to put up the damn sale stickers at 4 a.m. on Sundays. And in the health and beauty section, we did sell a couple of vibrators. So there was some kinky shit, but no BDSM at Kmart, I'll tell you that.
I mean, you just see what you would have to get creative. You would have to go to the kids section and get some handcuffs. Not that I know from experience.
Housewares to get some chains, you know?
Right. Like you can figure it out, right? All the pieces are there.
You just need a blue light special on it and then put it together.
Right. There's some rope, some you could make a cat of nine tails with stuff there. We'll take this offline. We'll figure this out. But Bashams are here with Shaniqua. They get their spankings before the match, which I guess, fuck, I mean, they're the champions. I guess it works. So who am I to judge, really? But the story here, because ultimately the match is pretty quick. There's not a lot to say about the match, honestly. We're building tension between the Guerreros. So at one point, Eddie had both the United States title and the tag team titles with Chavo. Eddie lost the U.S. title at No Mercy to the Big Show. And then they lost the tag team titles on SmackDown. Chavo's pissed at Eddie. He's like, you're losing focus. You know, it's like your U.S. titles, whatever, but that was our titles and you lost it. It was all your fault. You need to figure yourself out. So Chavo's in general just being a dick to Eddie. And there was even a segment on SmackDown which had a hilarious cameo from Darren Young.
Yeah.
So the or Detective Rosser, as he went by, which is his real last name, which is funny. But there's basically, if I can remember, so the detective came in. He was a plant from the Bashams, I think. Like he was the Bashams' buddy. And the Bashams told this fake detective to go in there and tell Eddie that his sister-in-law had gotten in a car accident. So therefore, Eddie couldn't wrestle in his match against the Bashams on SmackDown. So Chavo had to wrestle a handicap match. And then Chavo lost that match. But Eddie won a handicap match against the Bashams the week before. So we're building more hostility between Eddie and Chavo. What are your memories of this feud, I guess?
This was when I went back and rewatched because I remembered how much of this was the start of Eddie's road to the WWE Championship, really. If you think about it. They were cutting him loose from the tag team scene. He was going to beat Chavo at the Rumble, and he was going to move into the championship picture for the WWE title. So I was rewatching that, and I didn't realize how much of a dick Chavo was. But then I also, for No Mercy, Eddie Guerrero had someone come with fake burritos laced with laxative for Big Show. And so I was like, wait a sec, Eddie, you literally just did this to someone else a month ago. You're not going to double check this guy's credentials. You're just going to go with it. And It was so awkward because that was on that same show. We'll talk about him later, but that's where they also had the really awkward priest with Vince. And they were the worst acting performances I had ever seen in wrestling. And the guy, Mr. Guerrero, can I speak with you in private?
He's like SNL looking at cue cards.
Right? And I was like, I would never for 1 second believe this guy was a cop. I'd be like, yo, that's a toy badge. What the hell are you doing?
Got that same aisle that I got those handcuffs a while back. But,
right. Same set, you know?
With the little hat, everything. But yeah, so that's how we got here, I guess. But match itself, I feel like Shaniqua probably made the most impact in this match. I don't know. What you think about the match itself here?
This was an interesting time period because the Bashams were very similar to La Resistance on Raw, where they weren't exactly super memorable, but like they were a good hand. You could put them in matches, and anyone having a match with Eddie and Chavo was going to be good. But Bashams don't get enough credit. Their match with the APA was okay the month before, but like there's a reason why the company felt confident putting the belts on them. And this was a little bit better than I remembered. The original match they had for the tag titles was probably a little bit better. It got a little bit more time, I think, on SmackDown, but I liked it better than I remembered.
Yeah, good hands is a good way to describe. I mean, they have the character behind them, and I'm always, I'm always appreciative of a tag team that's a tag team. It's not just two singles guys slapped together. So I can appreciate that in that sense. They didn't move me, but I guess they were solid. I guess is the word for it. Shaniqua at some point, Eddie's on the outside. She gives him a clothesline and body slams Eddie in the ring. Eddie's getting beat down by the Bashams. Chavo gets the hot tag. But ultimately, at some point, Shaniqua gets frog splash. She gets her way in there. Then Chavo.
Oh, yeah. And Chavo gives her a good spanking, just for good measure.
Which is like, okay, that's like cringy either way. But the fact that Shaniqua was probably bigger than Chavo made it look even weirder. It's like, no, you're just spanking an adult. Like, it's very clear that that's what's happening. Yeah. I guess she does the spanking on, usually. So she's getting a taste of her own medicine, I guess. But Chavo at some point hits a tornado DDT on the Doug Basham, but in the process accidentally kicks Eddie. And so he knocks Eddie out of the ring by accident. And Danny Basham rolls up Chavo with the tights and gets the win. So the Bashams retain their titles. Solid match, pretty quick match, though. Relatively rushed, it felt like, but it wasn't offensively bad, I don't think.
No, the only offensive part was their celebration on the following SmackDown. That was very uncomfortable, but the match itself, yeah, was fine.
Man, getting me all goosed up to watch that. But
oh, you're gonna love it
for another day.
It's good stuff.
Is it like like the Edge and Lita segment, kind of akin to that?
Kind of, actually, yeah. A little bit more visual, if you believe that.
Ooh, well, I know what I'm doing after this. Let me tell you. Light some candles. Watch that.
Okay.
That's all boy needs. Oh, yeah. Well, speaking of something that I would light candles and jerk off to, we got a great match here. Next, we got a Survivor Series elimination 5-on-5 match. Team Austin versus Team Bischoff. Team Austin comprised of Booker T, the Dudleys, Rob Van Dam, and Shawn Michaels. Team Bischoff, you got Chris Jericho, Christian, Mark Henry, Randy Orton, Scott Steiner. My question is this, because the stakes here. So if Team Austin wins, because right now, Austin, Bischoff, co-GMs, Austin cannot attack anybody unless physically provoked. And Austin's pissed at that. He wants that regulation stripped. So if Team Austin wins, Austin can kick as much ass as he wants to. Team Bischoff wins, Stone Cold is fired. So high stakes here. This might be my favorite Survivor Series elimination match of all time. What do you think about it?
Oh, yeah. This one, I go back to this every year around Survivor Series. I think it's this one and the end of the Invasion storyline are the two that I can rewatch on loop pretty much. Yeah, because the pacing and the storytelling, and anytime you have stakes in a Survivor Series match, there's so many times, like the first one we saw with Angle and Lesnar, it was fun, but why were we getting invested in it? This one, you got emotionally invested. You had Austin's job on the line. You had Shawn Michaels at the end trying to overcome the odds. So it pulled you in a way that some of the other Survivor Series matches don't.
Right. Yeah, the stakes here is really the story. Like you said, there's an emotional investment. Stone Cold still at this point, even though he's not active, one of the most overacts in the entire company still. So just the thought of him not being in the company, even though he went like a year without him being there, but the thought of him not being with WWE anymore was crazy. And I remember watching this live. I was like on the edge of my seat, like this kid, there's no way Austin's team's going to lose. That's crazy. That would never happen. So, but then, yeah, the last half of the match was Shawn and the path to victory or the almost victory for him. But before that, because Sean doesn't even come into the match until like halfway into it. But I mean, there's just a lot going on here. Steiner kind of dominates in the beginning for Team Bischoff. He beats up RVD, beats up Booker. I mean, at this point, Steiner is like, I mean, how long is Steiner in the company after this? I can't remember anything he did after this.
I remember he was in the Royal Rumble in 04, and then I have no recollection of him after that.
Yeah, because we've tried him in the main event. The Stacy test thing has kind of fizzled out. We're just.
Well, part of it is I think they turned him heel way too late. I feel like he should have started as a heel, and he would have actually been a great first opponent. Imagine the Royal Rumble 2003 with Shawn Michaels still as the world champion with his back issues against Scott Steiner as a heel using the Steiner recliner. And then you get like an old school Shawn Michaels storyline against someone bigger than him, and you'd probably have been a better opponent where Steiner would get a better match out of it. Instead, you paired him up trying to be a face. No one wanted to cheer for this guy. He was the prototypical jock, you know? You were like,
Right.
oh my God, this dude's just walking around with these huge arms, telling me that my girlfriend wants to sleep with him. I don't want to cheer for this guy. I want to see him get hit in the head with a chair. Like, make this guy heel and get the booze. They didn't want to use the WCW guys the right way. And we see that later with Goldberg, but definitely with Steiner during that period too.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. You're right. He is just a stereotypical jock. Like, there's nothing particularly likable about his character. He's like spanking women on the ass and like slipping a digit in there. Like, he's a very creepy dude. Big arms and all that stuff. Like, look at these guns. Like, shut up, asshole. Stupid turban, metal turban.
He was a face. He was they were figuring out which show he was going to sign with. And he was going to go to SmackDown, but Stephanie wouldn't sleep with him on the desk right there in front of the whole crowd. And so he was like, oh, I knew you were a tease. I'm going to Raw. Why would that be a good guy? Why?
Dude, 2003 WWE ages worse than the Attitude Era than anything.
Oh, yeah.
It's just wild. It's a wild, wild west. But we don't have to deal with Steiner for long because match breaks down at some point. Everybody's in the ring. Steiner in the ring hits a low blow to Booker T, locks in the Steiner recliner. But Stacy, who is begrudgingly with Steiner here, she's rooting on Booker to get out of the recliner. Steiner, let's go. He's like, hey, Stacy, what are you doing? Or however he talks. And gets hit with the 2D, as it was named in video games, which is the 3D, but backwards. So a traditional back suplex neckbreaker deal. And then Booker hits the bookend on a Steiner following that and eliminates Big Papa Pump. So he's out of here. Pretty much right after that, Mark Henry in with the world's strongest slam to Booker T for the 1, 2, 3. He's out of there. Booker's a weird case too. I feel like at some point they just gave up on him. It's weird to see him eliminated first here when he was like in storyline. He was the first one to stand up for Stone Cold. Like he was kind of leading this charge and is never mind. You're out of here. See ya.
Yeah.
But the unpredictability though, as you were mentioning. So don't hate it. I don't hate it. Henry kind of dominates for a bit. He takes out both Dudleys, but then he gets 3D'd. Then RVD with the 5-star frog splash on Mark Henry to eliminate Mark. And Rob then goes for a 5-star on Orton. But Chris Jericho crotches Rob on the top rope, sends him in the ring into an RKO from Randy Orton. And all these eliminations are kind of like bam, bam, bam. Like they're pretty quick, similar to the earlier match. Right after that, Jericho hits his, I think he called it like the flashback or something. Jericho had a few finishers that he like tried to get over, but then they never really got over. Like he had like the skull crushing finale type of move. And this one, which is like a running, I don't know what you call it, almost not quite a zigzag, but like a spinning pull down neck breaker. I don't know. How would you describe it?
Yeah. I don't know how to describe it. Yeah. It's just, you're right. He was trying to do too much. It was such a weird move until, thank God, he ended up with the code breaker years later. But he was always trying to find that like standing finisher if it was like a video game. You know, he was constantly searching for it, but none of them really worked. Except, you're right. He did the skull crushing finale way before Miz did. Miz wasn't even around yet, and I'm pretty sure that's how he beat The Rock for the world title originally. So like he got that one over a little bit, but nothing beat the code breaker until years later.
Right. He'll get there. He'll get there eventually. But I guess it worked because he hits it on Devon to eliminate him. And finally, Shawn Michaels gets in. Now that half the people have been eliminated, he gets tagged in. This match is like pre-Shawn, post-Shawn. You can kind of separate it. Bubba hits the Bubba Bomb onto Jericho. He goes for the Bubba Bomb onto Jericho. But Jericho hits him with a low blow mule kick. And then Christian hits Bubba with the Unprettier to eliminate Bubba. So now we're in a 3-on-1 situation. We got Jericho, Christian, and Orton against Shawn Michaels. You might be thinking, well, Shawn Michaels just tagged in. He's fresh as a daisy. Well, he gets catapulted into the ring post outside, and I don't know if I've ever seen a more bloody person in my life. I mean, good golly, Miss Molly, this guy's gushing blood.
Just wait 30 minutes.
Yeah, fuck, you're not kidding. It's like, oh, goddamn, pal, you think that's blood? Let me show you blood.
Right.
So we're in peril here. So just to set the scene, if Shawn Michaels gets pinned, Stone Cold's fired. And it's very interesting because Shawn and Steve, they're not friends. They're not buddies. But Shawn is his only hope in keeping his career. And he's fighting uphill 3-on-1. But Shawn hits Christian with the Sweet Chin Music out of nowhere for the quick. By the way, I love how he hit the kick and then he just fell, just collapsed on Christian to get the 1, 2, 3. So he eliminated him, but just out of sheer luck, basically. Jericho beats down on Shawn. Shawn goes for the Sweet Chin Music onto Jericho, but gets caught in the walls of Jericho. But then Shawn counters it into a roll up and gets the quick 1, 2, 3 on Jericho. So Jericho's eliminated. So he's knocking him down one by one. He's on his way to victory. Oh, wait, here's Jericho back after the fact with a chair shot to the head. Knocks him out. And so now Shawn is dead, basically. And now we got Randy Orton. We got a 1-on-1 situation. But Shawn eventually fights back. He makes he's tuning up the band. He's firing up. He has Randy Orton on the mat. Starts tuning up the band. Then Eric Bischoff in with one of his patented karate kicks. Rate his karate kick out of 10.
Actually, I don't think it was that bad. I'd give it a 7. It looked devastating, but that's because Shawn Michaels sold the hell out of it.
Right. It was to the leg, I guess. It was more to disrupt the kick than anything. But Steve Austin, he's had enough of this tomfoolery. He gets in there. He beats up on Eric Bischoff, stomps a mud hole in Eric in the corner, turns around, hits Randy Orton with a Stone Cold Stunner. Orton sells it like $1 million. He just goes flying. He's all tied up in the ropes. He's out. Then Steve beats up on Eric Bischoff up the ramp. Then in the ring, that goddamn animal, Batista, Evolution member, storms the ring. He's done with that orgy, I guess. Gets to the ring. Batista bomb to Shawn Michaels. Randy Orton picks the bones, makes the pin. By the way, the ref got wiped out at some point, as per usual. Ref comes to. Slow count, but Randy Orton pins Shawn Michaels and is the sole survivor and has killed the career of Stone Cold Steve Austin. I mean, yeah, just the drama in this match, how everything unfolded, Randy getting the big win, the peril that Shawn was in, and the comeback of Shawn in this one, the almost comeback. I thought this match had it all. I loved it.
Yeah, and I didn't even think about it until you were just describing it, the way that Shawn hit the Sweet Chin Music on Christian, then kind of fell on him. I feel like that actually is what ends up happening a couple weeks after this when Shawn Michaels challenges Triple H. And that's where they get the double pin because he fell, but his shoulders ended up being on the mat too. So it was almost this really kind of cool foreshadowing of that.
Right.
And the blood I'm not huge where you have to have blood in the match, but it just added so much to it because we literally, and especially with JR and King, every time his heart beats, he's losing more blood. How can he survive? And that's why those two guys were the perfect commentators to tell this story. JR's connection to Austin, their storytelling ability. That's also what takes it to another level. because as much as I love Taz and Michael Cole on the earlier one, like Jim Ross, Jerry Lawler at this time period, I know Coach and Al Snow tried. They were doing okay, but they just they couldn't do it. Those two guys were excellent. My one problem with this match is I just didn't understand who the hell authorized it, because like the board of directors didn't like Eric Bischoff being on his own, so they gave him a co-general manager. Then the board of directors didn't like that Austin was beating everyone up, so they put in place he couldn't attack people. But then the board of directors approved this match where they're like, you guys can just get rid of one of our conditions. Just fuck it.
They just wanted to put this in the done pile. I don't want to deal with this,
Right.
all this paperwork you guys are pushing on us. Figure it out.
I would have liked actually if like Eric Bischoff was walking around with a petition and he was like, look, he goes up to the faces. Do you want Stone Cold to be able to kick ass again? Because like we can have the board of directors lift this, and then goes to the heels. Do you want to get rid of Stone Cold, or have like Jericho do that part? Do you want to get rid of Stone Cold? Sign this petition. And then Linda's like holding both of them. She's like, fine, fuck it. Just conditions are set. Go for it.
You would think they might have been a better way to go about it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Because Bischoff just announced it. He was just like chilling in a chair with Stone Cold in the ring. He was like, hey, you want to get rid of that thing? Well, how about this? And even when I rewatched it, I'm like, how does he have the power to do that?
Well, it was an offer to Steve, which Steve accepted. So it was more of a challenge than Eric just, it wasn't an executive order
Sure.
by any means. So it was a collaborative thing. But yeah, it was a wacky way to, him and Bischoff, the power struggles lasted most of this year. You would think this puts it to an end, but I don't believe it does. I think we have a sheriff that comes back at some point.
With a little badge he probably bought at Kmart. That's
See?
a different set.
So somebody just made one trip to Kmart and all the gimmicks
That
for
was
the
all
next
it
6
took.
months are settled.
Yep.
But yeah, so Austin's obviously the emotion dump after the 3 count at the end. Austin's look towards the ring because he was beating up on Eric Bischoff. He didn't even see what happened. So he's shocked. He gets into the ring, picks up Sean, who's bloody and exhausted. Sean says, I'm sorry. They just have a little moment between the two. They walk to the back, but then Steve comes back out to give a goodbye speech, I guess, because they're in Dallas, Texas. And Steve emphasizes this because his career started in Dallas, and now he's, what's the word he used? He said he was okay with, what was the word?
He said he didn't like any of it. He wasn't happy with any of it, but
Right.
he felt justified. I think it was
Justified. Yes, it started in Dallas and it ended in Dallas. He said, "I love the shit out of you guys." It's a cool moment.
Yeah.
But then that goddamn Coach's music is just like the most.
Yes.
I don't know how to describe it. It's like the last thing I want to hear if I'm sad. Like it's like, oh, this like shut the fuck up, Coach.
Mm-hmm.
But he comes out, nah, hey, goodbye, all that stuff. Coach is happy to see him gone. Coach comes out with a bunch of cops, and he's like, hey, I'm here to tell you, you need to get your ass out of here, Steve. And then Steve kicks the shit out of all these cops. I guess none of them had weapons or nightsticks or whatever the hell. I guess they blew their budget on handcuffs. So Austin destroys all the cops, gives a stunner to Coach, and then has a beer bash and leaves 2 beers in the middle of the ring. So this all kind of encapsulates this Austin, character over the past few years. So it's a good way to end it, quote unquote, even though it doesn't really end it, but I thought they kind of put a good bow on it here.
I have a question because you've been following this whole time period. Well, so like, was there any friction leading into Survivor Series? Because Austin seemed hesitant to ask Michaels to be on his team, but I don't remember Michaels like being like, oh, well, I don't like you, Steve, being the general manager at all. And all of a sudden it's just like, oh man, they're not that tight. Will Sean even say yes? So what was going on with that?
So they hadn't really interacted at all on screen. I think the last time they interacted on screen was WrestleMania 14, right? 14.
Mm-hmm.
The main event, which, is Sean's personality and things he was dealing with at that time. I'm sure they didn't have a lot of love for each other at that point. And I guess that was kind of public, I guess. Maybe is big, I don't know. But yeah, so it was like, is that tension still there from all those years ago, kind of thing, and just very different personalities in general. So nothing really specifically to cause friction, but I think it was just a callback to WrestleMania 14. But we followed that up with a nice and light little buried alive match. The Undertaker taking on Vince McMahon, which is just seeing this on paper is hilarious. So the way we got here, so Vince and Undertaker, so they kind of play it up like Taker says that Vince has been trying to screw him for years, trying to keep that world title away from him because Taker hasn't been champion for that long of his career. Vince has been running amok. We talked about it earlier with, beating up on Zach Gowen, the one-legged guy, and then beating up his daughter and abusing his wife, like all this stuff. And Taker's been like kind of the constant, like the guy calling him on his shit, the guy coming to the defense of like Stephanie and things like that. So Taker's been a thorn in Vince's side, and Vince also cost Taker the WWE title at No Mercy by costing him in that chain match, pushing him off the top rope onto the ropes and leading to his downfall there. So on SmackDown, Taker had the opportunity to earn any match that he wants, any opponent, anywhere, any place. And this was all kind of, it was more the idea of the new GM who was introduced on SmackDown, by the way, Paul Heyman. So Paul Heyman, I forget exactly why. I think he was bullied into it for some reason. Paul was, but it was also insurmountable odds. Taker had to beat both Big Show and Brock in a handicap match to earn this opportunity, and they did a bunch of screwy, like Taker he won, like Big Show got counted out. But then Paul's like, "Oh wait, there's no count out. Sorry, I forgot to mention." And then Brock hits Taker with a chair and gets disqualified, and Paul's like, "Oh wait, no, Bob's my uncle. I forgot to mention. There's also no DQs." And then it's like no submission or whatever the hell. The Taker eventually wins beyond that and earns the right to choose any match he wants. And Vince thinks he's going to challenge Brock for the title again. But lo and behold, he wants a match not with Brock, but with Vince. And it's buried alive. Boy, howdy. I mean, where do we even begin here? It's just anyone that wants to see Vince get his ass kicked, I think this is the match for you. Would you say?
Oh yeah, definitely. It was very interesting watching that storyline back because, like we talked about earlier, Vince had completely lost his mind. I really, for some odd reason, that all my life, ever since that moment happened where Undertaker picked Vince, that lived rent free in my head. And my brother and I, anytime it snowed, my brother would just look at me and he'd go, "The match is buried alive." And we would go outside, we would dig a fake graveyard, and we would have ourselves a buried alive match. And, there's a crack in the title belt behind me from me hitting him in the head with it. Good times had by all. No one got seriously hurt. It's okay. But this storyline, it was actually beautiful seeing that this was the end of the American Badass character. Because if you think back, that's how it started. Was Undertaker had come back, and I think it was like the first Raw or SmackDown after his return at Judgment Day, where he was backstage trying to run Vince down on his motorcycle. And so they were having issues right from there. And so it was actually very poetic where there was a through line to the whole American Badass saga, where he was constantly coming at odds with Vince. Even when they were both heel, there was tension. So it was like law-informed storytelling at its finest. So I really was digging the story going into it. And then, like you said, if you want to see Vince get his ass kicked, this is the match. At the Royal Rumble, he was competitive against Flair.
Yeah.
At WrestleMania, Royal Rumble 02. At WrestleMania in 2003, he was competitive with Hogan. And yet all of a sudden in this one, Vince it's a squash match. It is a completely different story. So, and the blood, we talked about it earlier. Oh my God, the blood. First punch. That's it.
Oh, dude.
Gushing.
This match, one punch, is all it took, which is like the comedy of it, because like Vince kind of alluded to it in a segment earlier with Shane. Vince is like going psychotic. He feels like God is looking for out, like a higher power is looking out for him. He's walking around with these prayer hands. He's like, "Oh, I've been chosen to bury Undertaker alive," and he comes out there like almost kind of cocky, gets in Undertaker's face. He's like, "I don't care what you're gonna do, because I'm gonna do this." And then Undertaker, one right hand, gosh, busted open.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're just beating him around the announce table. There's blood all over the table. Beats him in the ring. He crotches him on the post. Shoves Vince in the ring. Goes to the grave, a big mound of dirt, and grabs the shovel. Takes the shovel to the ring. Brings Vince up to his feet. And then just with the most sickening swing, cracks Vince right in the face with the shovel. This is not like a, let me hit you in the back, let me do the old Triple H sledgehammer deal and like cover it a little bit. No, there's just a baseball swing with a shovel. Now, even if it's like a gimmicked shovel, like he hit him so fucking hard with this. And but it's probably not. Vince is crazy, so who knows? And then he takes Vince on the outside, which is, I believe that's a callback to a 99, 98 story where he put Vince's ankle on the steps and crushes it with the other part of the steps, I believe, right?
Yes.
And it's at this point where Taker's like, okay, I think he might be beat up enough to bury alive. Let me carry this bad boy which is just, wrestling is just insane. But he carries Vince to the mound of dirt that's on the stage, throws Vince on the dirt, goes to pull him up, but Vince, this crafty little bugger, takes some of the dirt and throws it in the eyes of Undertaker, hits Taker with a low blow, and then hits Taker with the shovel, knocking Undertaker into the grave. So it's like, oh my God, is Vince going to pull this one out? But Taker, before Vince can dump the dirt on him, Taker pulls in Vince into the grave with him, does whatever the hell to him in that grave. Probably the same thing Kane did to Shane. But he goes, he has Vince knocked out in the grave. Taker walks to the payloader that's next to the grave, has dirt loaded in it, just ready to dump on the grave. He goes to this payloader, I would assume, to dump the dirt on Vince, but then explosion out of nowhere, a big ball of fire. Knox. What's funny about that? It's a serious business there, Mark. It's an explosion.
I'm
he was
sorry.
Wounded by this explosion. He was knocked out by this explosion. Nothing to chortle about. And then what caused this explosion, you may ask? Well, none other than Undertaker's brother, Kane, walks from behind the payloader. I guess he summoned this explosion. Blinded Taker, made him woozy, who knows, but that pretty much knocks Taker into the grave. Kane pulls Vince out, and then Kane tells Vince to go into the payloader and drop the dirt, and boy howdy did he. Now, I think on Peacock, they cut out a lot of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, didn't this take like a long time to drop the dirt?
I think it did, because I actually didn't watch it on Peacock. I broke out the old DVD and I watched it, and it did take a little while. It wasn't as bad as like Austin and Undertaker, that buried alive match, but right. Yeah, it wasn't a very quick process.
Yeah, it was I guess maybe getting beat about the head bloody by a shovel really hard maybe makes you not know how to use heavy machinery. I think they put that on the label.
Speaking of that, though, I absolutely love how Vince completely no-sold the ankle injury. Like, Kane pulls him out of the grave, and then he's like, go in there. And so Vince just like, runs right down the grave. Adrenaline. Must be. And then he climbs in the payloader, no problem. And the very next match, we have a guy who had his ankle shattered like a month ago who's still, hobbling around. And Vince is just like, there's minutes to go, but I'm all right.
So Vince McMahon is tougher than Goldberg is what you're saying.
He is. And that's why he did that, to prove it,
Yeah. Interesting.
Classic Vince.
Interesting. I like it. That these WCW guys, they don't hold a candle.
Nope.
Vincent K. No, you're right. You're right about that. So yeah, more WrestleMania foreshadowing. A lot. This
Mhm.
show's full of it, and we're still 4 months away. So getting off the ground quick here. Kane coming back to bury his brother alive. Surely that won't come back to bite him. But
Nope.
all that to say, this is the last ever biker taker match. It's a very people are kind of hot and cold for it. What do you think about that iteration of Undertaker, biker taker, all that stuff?
Honestly, I didn't start watching wrestling until 2000 when SmackDown was on broadcast television because
Mm,
my family we didn't have cable when I was growing up. So the only Taker I knew was Biker Taker until he came back, and all of a sudden, like now he was doing the fresh version of the Deadman that was a hybrid, and then as he was becoming more and more my favorite, I started looking back at the old stuff. So I actually kind of got his storyline in reverse. So it was very weird because Biker Taker, I liked him because he could cut promos. He, especially when he was a heel in '02, some of his promo work, his run with the hardcore title, I thought he was doing some really great work, and it opened him up match wise. He wasn't just walking around slow like a zombie. He was able to
right.
break out submissions. He was having all kinds of stuff. So I really liked Undertaker as the biker. And then obviously his ideal mode is in a couple months from now when he's the hybrid because he's the best of both worlds. But I didn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, no, definitely. He was more of a, I guess, dynamic character, especially this period, like '03, '02. Like, like once he turned heel, he kind of found his stride.
Mhm.
There's a while where he was wearing like cheetah pants or like denim. It was like, all right, I don't know how I feel about this big take, but
Mhm.
yeah, big evil, all that stuff. It was really good stuff. And but that is no more, as a dead man may or may not rise here at some point, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But also buried alive matches, it's like, all right, yep, there's some murder. Anyways, next match we got like it's such a weird.
Mhm.
It's in the kayfabe. The suspending of disbelief for me is always so weird with these buried alive matches. Like, oh, this guy died. Anyways, which I guess they're not above doing that, but
True.
so I guess they're consistent, if nothing else. But that
That'd
brings
probably be
us.
one of my biggest complaints would be the match order because this probably should have been the main event. And then
You don't
you
think
close with Kane laughing maniacally on the grave.
you don't think Goldberg versus Triple H was worth? You don't think a kayfabe injured Goldberg versus a real life injured Triple H in a best case scenario is pretty shitty? Matt, like, I don't know, I guess it's like it's the top title on the top show. I get it. It's Goldberg and Triple H. Like on paper, that's like, oh man, two of the biggest stars ever colliding here. But yeah, this wasn't great. It wasn't
Mhm.
great. I didn't think.
That's putting it mildly.
So I'll tell you. So first of all, the backstory. It's whatever. Like Goldberg won the title from Triple H at Unforgiven. Triple H put a bounty on Goldberg, $100,000. Whoever takes him out gets the money. Turns out to be Batista, who returned from injury, took out Batista, gave him the old Brian Pillman with the chair around the ankle, smashed it, smashed his leg, therefore making Evolution whole again. And so that's how we're here. So Goldberg is hobbled. How is he going to win with one leg? Triple H is here. He's got the biker shorts. A lot going on. But as I was watching this show, I fell asleep at some point during this match because I'd watch this all in one sitting, and I was like, I didn't think I was, and I woke up and I was like, damn,
Mhm.
Evolution's in the ring. I missed a lot. I have to rewatch this later. And then I rewatched it. I was like, no, I didn't really miss anything, actually. I think I fell asleep for like 5 seconds because 1 second, Triple H is beating Goldberg. He's putting his leg on the chair or on the steps and hitting it with a chair and taking advantage of the injury. Then it's like, oh, here's a sledgehammer. All Evolution's in here. Bing, bang, boom. Goldberg hits him all with the sledgehammer, spear, jackhammer. Let's go home. So not a lot to it, honestly. But there was also like
No,
almost too much to it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this one?
this one, I feel like I like the Unforgiven one better, where it was just Triple H and Goldberg,
Yeah.
because even though that was a slow and plodding match too, at least it really felt like it was just these two gladiators. This one, with it just being the overbooked mess at the end, just so they could really make Goldberg look strong because he was on one leg. Yeah, but he had a sledgehammer. So like, was he really that impressive?
But then he threw the sledgehammer out. He's like, I don't, after he's already used it a bunch, he's like, you know what? I don't think I need this. Spear jackhammer.
But I really, really randomly, as I was rewatching this, I appreciate that they tried again with Evolution because most other stables, if they start in like a month and a half, 2 months in, two out of the four guys get hurt and are going to be gone for a while, they would just drop the storyline. They would never talk about it again. But when Orton came back, no, Evolution was back to three people. And when Batista came back, they put him right back in. They could have had him just come back to SmackDown as part of Team Lesnar. They're trying to build up this big team. He could have taken that Nathan Jones spot. But they actually said, no, this is what we want to do. We want to have Orton and Batista learn from Flair and Triple H. And I'm grateful because otherwise we wouldn't have had Orton and Batista's great careers if they just gave up on him there.
That's a great point. Yeah, because Evolution as a foursome, like it was established, but then Orton and Batista got injured like right after, so they didn't really have they didn't really get started. So to your point, they could have just dropped it, pretend it didn't happen. But I would assume Triple H, Ric Flair, they saw something in Batista and Orton, which bravo to them, I guess. It's interesting, like watching back all the Raws and stuff. I didn't think Batista, in my head, Batista took a while to like find that star power, but they put a mic in front of him. He's like a pretty good talker already. Like even back in 03, like he's got obviously the look, like he feels like a star already. So it's like they obviously saw that, and Orton is kind of just a slam dunk as well. So yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad they stuck with it, and they would honestly not a super long lasting faction in the grand scheme of things, because Orton's out by SummerSlam. So they made an impact, I suppose. But yeah, this match is just overbooked. I mean, Hebner's in here. He gets laid out at some point. Flair throws Triple H the knucks. Triple H puts on these brass knucks, hits Goldberg with it, 2 count, and then we get the sledge. It's whatever. Triple H introduces the sledgehammer. Goldberg takes it, destroys Evolution with it. Spear jackhammer win. And yeah, by the way, Triple H definitely like kicked out, by the way, of this jackhammer. If you go back and watch it, he like definitely got his shoulder up at 2. But they're like, fuck it. Yeah, whatever. We're done with this.
Yeah, they were out of time.
Yeah. Hit your marks, pal. But yeah, weird. Like I said, I get putting this in the main event, but this is like one of the most underwhelming matches of the entire card. I think Kane maniacally, like you said, maniacally laughing on that mound of dirt over top his brother, who is now deceased. Would have been a more powerful ending. But
right. I figure you got 3 options. You've got the Kane on the grave, you've got the one that they went with Goldberg, or you've got the visual of the 2 beer cans as Austin leaves.
That's actually probably what I would have gone with. I think
right, but then the problem with that is that you wanted that match to end with Orton and Batista looking strong, ending Austin's career. So it would have looked really weird if they got hit with the sledgehammer by Goldberg first, and then later on they have that. So I feel like you would have had to restructure it where it was the Raw Survivor Series, the World Heavyweight title, and then Buried Alive in that order.
Right. You also could just not have Batista and Orton get involved in the world title match. Maybe, I don't know. Is that crazy?
True.
But yeah, I get your point. It's in the end, Orton and Batista kind of looked weak because it was just one sledgehammer shot apiece, and you're dead.
And it was as soon as they ran in the ring. And even King, my favorite line of the night, he was like, "Rats foiled again." Like, he was like, "What the fuck are we doing here?"
It was very Tom and Jerry.
Oh, right? There's Batista. Boom. Oh, there's Orton. Boom. Rats foiled again. What was the point of this?
There goes all that stock of RKO and Mark Cuban, I guess. But
right. Yeah. Think of the night Randy Orton had. Highs and lows. RKO's Mark Cuban wins the Survivor Series match. 1 sledgehammer shot. End of the night. And he got his nipple. He got his nipple grabbed.
Well, I think that makes it a net positive for old Randall.
True.
Especially Phil Charmel. Shout out.
Yeah.
Shout out, Queen. But this whole show was one big nipple twist in a good way. The main event was what it was. But all in all, this show, I thought it was a dandy. Like I said, I had pretty high standards in my head because this is one of my favorite shows, and sometimes rewatching stuff, it doesn't age as well, but I thought for the most part the show aged about as good as I expected. What about you?
I definitely agree with that. And like I said earlier, it's like the season finale almost. They're closing the book on a lot of rivalries and they're starting the road to WrestleMania early. The only problem is when you have Austin come back like less than a month later as the sheriff, it loses some of the dramatic feel of it. Like if they held off and he came back at WrestleMania and we finally found a special referee for Goldberg Lesnar, glass shatters. That would have been a huge moment. But it was like even Triple H was making fun of him later. And I'm sure you're going to cover it when you do Armageddon and everything, but like, oh, you've got your little pretend badge. What are you doing? And it was like we go from what was a perfect ending for Stone Cold, the visual, the two beer cans. And I see your shirt there with the broken skull.
Yep.
I got my American lager here, you know?
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
So it was like the perfect ending for Austin. And then he comes back as the sheriff and ruined it. But all in all, I think there were a lot more good matches than I remembered. I liked the undercard title matches. They could have used more time. But obviously, when you have the payloader with the dirt and Survivor Series matches take a while, and the Mark Cuban stuff, you only had so much time. But all in all, I agree. I think it was a lot better than I remembered.
Yeah, it was a fun show, I guess is the way to describe it. Is it good? I don't know. That's the jury's still out on that one, but it was fun. I had fun watching it, and ultimately that's all that matters. I don't know how many other ways you could have booked this, but speaking of booking like a Mark. Appreciate you, Mark, for joining me on the show. Lovely time having you. Where can everybody find you, listen to you, and twist your nipples?
Well, you could listen to us on Spotify, Acast, and iHeartRadio. Booking Like a Mark, we rewrite past storylines, create new matches and PLEs, and come up with some new characters. It's not just fantasy booking, it's Booking Like a Mark. And you can follow me on X, but don't follow me in the street because that's weird shit and I will punch you. But yeah, hit us up. Come up with, we love good ideas. Yeah, be sneaky. Don't grab my nipple in the street. That's also weird.
At least ask first.
Be polite, yeah.
Be a joke.
But yeah, we're always looking for new ideas. So every so often, my brother will join me or my girlfriend who doesn't watch wrestling, so we get some different perspectives. And I may go rebook some more of 2003 now. You got me back in this mindset a bit.
You're talking about significant others watching. My wife hates Test. Like I'll watch it all. She has such a funny window of knowledge. She's like in 2024, she hates Andrew Martin and hates the Hurricane for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that I kind of get. I don't know. But anyways, Hail Satan. I don't know how to end shows. Sometimes I just say Hail Satan or what's your go home line?
Usually I end with the whole, it's not fantasy booking, it's Booking Like a Mark. But I can give you a toast.
Yeah,
I've got my nice Stone Cold beer here.
Sorry,
crack it open for you.
I have a water bottle here.
That's all right. Okay, guys, thank you very much for having me, Kyle. Kyle was cooking. I was booking. Thanks a lot, brother.
That's a lot of fun, cooking and booking. That's some good stuff. That's better than what is it? Some ships are made of wood. Some ships are something.
What the fuck?
It ends with if you can't come in or come on her. Once again, thank you to Mark from Booking Like a Mark for joining me today. Great time with Mark. Definitely going to have him on again. It was a good old time talking some mid-early 2000s WWE. Go check out Booking Like a Mark wherever you listen to podcasts. Find them on social medias. All this stuff will be in the description below. Follow me at Apron Bump, apronbump.com for everything. Go check out my watch alongs on YouTube. Just did one for Progress Chapter 171. As of recording this, I'm not exactly sure when this will be, but I'll be doing a Progress watch along of Chapter 40 very soon as well. So I'll put all the promo codes and stuff you can enter to sign up for Demand Progress Plus if you want half off your sub. And what else? I think that's about all Daddy has for you today. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Love you all. Big old smooches all over your tum-tum. I'm hard.
Yeah. And the hardest, talk around and disregard it. Strip you off the ground, show you what hard is. Standing strong and proud, nothing can knock it. Let's get it started. It's the hardest. Talk around and disregard it. Sweep you off the ground, show you what heart is. Standing strong and proud, nothing can knock this. Let's get it started.